2,000 Japanese Marines thought they were about to crush 300 tired soldiers. Instead, they ran straight into 9,000 troops waiting in the mud. This wasn't just a mistake, it was one of the biggest blunders of World War II. But how do you confuse a few hundred men with an entire army? And why has almost nobody heard of this battle that stopped Japan on Australia's doorstep? Let's find out.
Welcome to Unveiled History.
It's 1942, and Japan is dominating the Pacific like nothing we've ever seen. They've taken the Philippines, conquered Singapore, and they're pushing through New Guinea toward Australia. But Milne Bay, this remote corner of Papua New Guinea, becomes absolutely critical for both sides. For General MacArthur and the Allies, it's the perfect spot for a secret. Forward base, 3 airstrips hidden in the jungle to protect the sea routes and support the American landings at Guadalcanal. For the Japanese, capturing Milne Bay means they get their own airbase to attack Allied shipping and support their forces fighting along the brutal Kokoda track. Whoever holds those airstrips commands the Southwest Pacific. But the conditions are absolutely hellish. We're talking about non-stop rain, thick jungle, and malaria-ridden swamps. The mud is so deep it can swallow tanks. And here's where it gets interesting. Both sides were preparing for what they think will be completely different battles. And that isn't the worst part yet. Now this is where the Japanese make a mistake that will haunt them forever. Based on their aerial reconnaissance, Japanese command believes Milne Bay is defended by maybe 2 or 3 companies. That's about a few hundred troops at most. And they built their entire invasion plan on this assumption. But what's actually waiting for them? Nearly 9,000 Allied personnel. That's 7,500. Australians, 1,400 Americans, and 600 Royal Australian Air Force personnel. A number almost 30 times what the Japanese expected. Think about this for a second. You're planning a surprise attack, thinking you're facing 300 soldiers, but you're actually walking into a force of 9,000. That's not just bad. Intelligence, that's catastrophic. The Japanese deploy about 2,000 elite naval marines. Their absolute best troops. In any normal scenario, 2,000 elite soldiers against 300 defenders? That's game over. But against 9,000, it's suicide. The Allied commander, Major General Cyril Claus, they called him Silent Cyril, had a plan. He was going to use the inexperienced militia units to absorb the first Japanese, attack, then unleash his veteran troops for a devastating counterattack. What do you think? Are you starting to see how badly this could go for the Japanese? Drop your thoughts in the comments. You'd think that was the end of it, but this intelligence disaster was just the beginning. August 25th, 1942. The Japanese army landed on the beach at night. But immediately nothing goes according to plan. A navigation error means they land 11 kilometers away from their target. Now they have to fight their way through 11 kilometers of jungle hell just to reach their objective. The Australian militia units in the front line were getting hammered due to their inexperience. The Japanese were advancing with their signature night attacks, supported by light tanks, and it looks like their doctrine of overwhelming speed and shock might work. But the Japanese didn't account for the Royal Australian Air Force. Those Kitty Hawk fighter bombers based right at Milne Bay. They were providing constant air support during daylight hours. They were strafing Japanese positions, destroying their landing barges, and forcing them to rely on muddy coastal tracks. Without their boats, the Japanese were stuck. They can't bring in supplies. They can't evacuate wounded, and they're slowly being choked off from the sea. Still, By August 28th, the Japanese had pushed through to the edge of the main airstrip. They were so close they can see the Allied planes taking off and landing. And that's when they make a decision that will haunt military historians forever. Here's where everything changes. After receiving 800 reinforcements, the Japanese decided to go all in. Early morning, August 31st, they launched their final, desperate assault across the airstrip. Picture this scene. It's pitch black, pouring rain, and 2,800 Japanese Marines are charging across an open airfield toward entrenched Australian and American positions. The Allies are ready. They light up the night with star shells, illuminating the entire Japanese force. Then comes the artillery, mortars and machine gun fire. It's absolute carnage. In this single disastrous assault, the Japanese suffer 2/3 of their total battle. Casualties, their doctrine of night attacks, and overwhelming small defenses completely collapsed against a numerically superior, well-prepared force. By dawn, they were retreating, and that's when Silent Cyril springs his trap. He orders the counterattack, sending in his veteran Australian Imperial Force units, the 212th and 209th Battalions. And the battle got brutal. You can now imagine how this completely changed the war, because if you think this victory was impressive, wait until you hear what the Allies were dealing with behind the scenes. By September 6th, it was over. The surviving Japanese were being evacuated by sea, leaving behind over 750 dead comrades. Let's look at the numbers that tell this story. Japanese casualties: over 750 killed, 311 wounded. Allied casualties: 181 killed, just over 200 wounded. But here's the thing that makes this victory even more remarkable. The Allies were fighting a war on two fronts. While they were defeating the Japanese at Milne Bay, they were simultaneously dealing with a malaria epidemic that hospitalized 6,000 men. Between July and December, 6,000 soldiers, that's more than the entire battle force, taken out by disease. The Australian army was so unprepared for tropical warfare that troops were arriving without basic mosquito nets or repellent. So they were not just defeating elite Japanese Marines, they were doing it while their own forces are being decimated by malaria. That makes this victory even more incredible. The Japanese, meanwhile, are learning a harsh lesson. Their strategy of using relatively small, elite forces to capture objectives had worked everywhere else. But at Milne Bay, they ran into something they'd never faced before. A larger, better equipped, and well-supported Allied force. But you want to know the real kicker? This battle didn't just defeat the Japanese, it completely rewrote the psychology of the entire Pacific War. Here's why this forgotten battle changed everything. For 8 months, the Japanese military seemed unstoppable. Every battle, every campaign, they won. Military experts worldwide believed they were invincible. Milne Bay shattered that myth forever. General Slim of the British forces said it perfectly. The Australians had proven the Japanese are not invincible. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological turning point. Allied forces across the Pacific, including troops fighting the desperate battle along the Kokoda track, suddenly had hope. But the strategic implications were even bigger. By holding Milne Bay, the Allies secured their southern flank and established a forward base for future operations. Those three airstrips became the launching point for the Allied advance across the Pacific. And here's something most people don't realize. This battle was happening at the exact same time as the American landings at Guadalcanal. The Japanese were fighting a two-front war, stretching their resources and strategic focus. The combination of defeats at both Milne Bay and Guadalcanal marked the end of Japanese expansion, and the beginning of their long retreat across the Pacific. Seriously, think about this for a second. What if the Japanese had won at Milne Bay? What if they'd secured those airstrips and could attack Allied shipping at will? The entire Pacific War could have gone differently, especially with today's modern politics. What's your take on this? While you think about that, here's something that'll blow your mind about why this battle got forgotten. Maybe it's because it happened in a remote corner of Papua New Guinea. Maybe it's because the Kokoda Track campaign gets all the attention. Or perhaps it's because military historians tend to focus on major American victories, such as Midway and Guadalcanal, but the men who fought at Milne Bay deserve better. Today, there's a black granite memorial in Papua New Guinea honoring the Australians, Americans, and local Papua New Guineans who fought there. The Turnbull War Memorial marks the spot where squadron leader Peter Turnbull died defending the airstrip that now bears his name. The next time someone tells you they know World War II history, ask them about Milne Bay. We guarantee they've never heard of the forgotten battle that helped save Australia and change the course of the Pacific War. And speaking of forgotten battles, what other untold stories from World War II do you think deserve the spotlight? Drop your suggestions below. And if this video opened your eyes to a piece of history you never knew existed, smash that like button and subscribe. See you next time.